Recreational Equipment Inc., or REI, is one of the largest and most well-known outdoor stores in the United States. This place has survived the Second World War, the Great Depression, multiple recessions, a total economic shift away from brick-and-mortar stores, all the while not operating as a traditional business. One of the main reasons that they have been able to pull this off is because of their company structure as a co-op. But what does that even mean? A huge thank you to Skillshare for sponsoring today's video. Now, I may be a Canadian, but I recently had the pleasure of visiting an REI for the first time in Austin, Texas while I was looking for a sleeping pad. And the experience was surprisingly normal. I don't know why, but for some reason in my head, a co-op was gonna be basically like a garage sale or something like that. But I have to stress upon you that it was just a normal store, basically, with a lot of staff members wearing Birkenstocks and toques, even though it was pretty warm out. Now, according to the REI website, the co-op was founded by, you guessed it, a couple of real outdoorsy folk. Lloyd and Mary Anderson just wanted a decent ice axe without having to spend an arm and a leg, right? And they learned that the cheapest way to outfit themselves was to group purchase equipment directly from Austria with 21 of their friends. And thus, in 1938, the REI co-op was founded. From the very beginning, the point of REI was just to make the wilderness more accessible by providing quality gear at a reduced cost. I know, it sounds super weird, but these rock climbers weren't completely money motivated. They just wanted to work collectively together to have a good time, like a bunch of communists. To that end, they invited everybody to their ranks. They could join for $1 a pop, and they could become an REI co-op member and join the movement. But I think we need to rewind a little bit because I don't think we actually know what a co-op is, do we? Now, while REI has certainly morphed over the last 85 years, the basic idea remains the same. Unlike every other company that we've covered on this channel and pretty much any business that you can name, REI is not owned by the stock market or one or a few business people. It is collectively owned by its members. So if you bought yourself a lifetime membership, which you have to have in order to buy anything from the store, you theoretically have as much of a share in the company as, say, the CEO. Just like when REI was founded, memberships are designed to be super easy and affordable. For just $30, you get access to all the goods, you get exclusive discounts, and the opportunity to vote for board members and more. Now, while this might not sound overly revolutionary, it is a pretty innovative way of doing business. But you know what else is super innovative? The sponsor of today's video, Skillshare. You may know that Skillshare has classes for like photography and film and video editing, illustration, all those creative things. But did you know that Skillshare also has hundreds of career-focused classes as well? I have been working with Skillshare for years, and I honestly think that it is one of the best ways to launch your passion project or create the businesses or the products that you want to see in the world. This series of videos all about starting your own business or refining your brand is a great place to start if you're looking to take your company to the next level. They have tutorials on how to set up your first Shopify e-commerce store, which we're a big fan of as well, obviously. And you have everything that you need right there on Skillshare, and you can access it from wherever you happen to be. No goal is too small, and Skillshare allows you to learn all the tips that you need to get started. So the first 1,000 people to use the link down in the description will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. Now, like I said, when I went into the co-op, it looked very much like another retail store. But REI is fundamentally different than those other stores in one huge way. They're supposed to be there specifically to serve their members and communities, not to make a profit. REI has long made it a point to invest in nonprofits, to host events and classes, and to push for political change that aligns with the company values. In their case, helping everybody enjoy the outdoors. But what I found really interesting about the whole co-op thing is how it has shaped a business's approach and thinking about time. The Atlantic did this interview with REI's then CEO. The Atlantic did this interview with REI's then CEO, Jerry Stritzky, who contrasted his experience working for publicly traded companies and REI. See, a publicly traded company like, say, North Face or Nike exists specifically to provide profits for shareholders. Stritzky talked about how when he was in that world, he was pretty much required to obsess about short-term numbers. How is the company doing this year, this quarter, this week? How do we keep these investors engaged in our company? That doesn't leave a lot of space for thinking about the next 3, 5, 10 years. And as we all know from being human, that's not the most helpful way of thinking about things. Sometimes you just have to be able to sacrifice that short short-term enjoyment to have that long-term success. Like waiting that little 3 minutes for the pizza pocket to cool down after you pulled it out of the microwave, even though you want to eat it so bad, but you know that the lava inside would just melt the tongue out the bottom of your mouth if you did. If you want to see a video about pizza pockets, I would be open to it. I would be open to it. But REI doesn't have to play by those same rules. While the rest of the retail world is spinning around like that teacup ride, constantly trying to up profits and make people vomit all over themselves, REI is able to measure its success by a totally different set of metrics. Not by last quarter's profits, but by their impact on the community. That's why they're able to do things like shut down their stores on Black Friday, and instead pay their employees to enjoy time outside. It's qualities like these that have helped REI survive turbulent economic shifts. Since the rise of Amazon and online goods, we have witnessed a number of big names, brick and mortar stores, collapse under the same circumstances. It has been very difficult for these companies to keep up with the convenience and lower price point of their competitors who save big by bypassing the middleman and selling directly to consumers. And yet, REI has not just survived this change, but thrived within it. This was apparently such a noteworthy feat even before a certain virus that shall not be named, that when we Googled around about REI, we found a few articles from big names that centered around this question. How is it that REI's revenue grew when comparable chains tanked? As Stritsky described it, REI differentiates itself by specializing. You're not going to be able to buy a backpack made by children in a country on the other side of the planet with 1-day shipping. But REI doesn't have to worry about that because their target audience is a little different. They don't just sell stuff, they sell an experience. They sell the idea of that community and the values that go along with it. Millennials today, and increasingly with these younger generations, want their dollars to go into something more than just whatever is the cheapest. And REI's position as an outdoor brand that sells high quality products is kind of like the perfect Venn diagram. Is the Venn diagram, is that the one where like the two circles come together like that? Gearheads are a real thing, and you can spend all day on different camping subreddits to learn about what gear you should buy or not buy for your next surfing trip. And you can go into an REI and talk to Craig about what kind of wetsuit he uses. The REI membership is a literal representation of that feeling. You are a part of that community and those values, and this brand represents that community, at least on paper. Now, I'm not American, so I don't know what it's like to live somewhere where an REI is just a part of your hometown. So I found it pretty interesting when I was watching some of the reactions to the recent announcement that REI would be leaving Portland.
I have always been a rock climber, and I ski and snowboard, so I come here a lot for supplies. So that will be a loss for the community.
It seemed like a genuine loss for the people a part of that community. Unlike when Target disappeared from Canada and everybody was like, why were they here in the first place? But even just the fact that REI is a co-op gives it an advantage. A couple of years back, Forbes reported that 76% of us are more likely to purchase from a co-op simply because it's a co-op, which is kind of funny because in the same survey they showed that only about 10% of people actually know what a co-op is. Whatever the reason, there is no denying that REI has done phenomenally well for themselves. They started with 1 location and 23 members, and now they have 23 million members and over 16,000 employees across the United States. And I know they're not supposed to care about this stuff, but they also raked in $3.8 billion in sales. That's enough to make some profit-driven companies jelly, which gets us thinking. It sounds like co-ops have a ton of advantages, and they're really awesome and great, so why do we not see more of them? Out of curiosity, we checked out to see if there was any other recognizable co-ops out there, and there are a few, for sure. Ocean Spray and Sunkist, for example, are both agricultural co-ops owned by farmers. We're not gonna get into whether or not those companies are good and whether or not you should buy from them. Let us know if you wanna see a full video on that. But what we do know is that in 2018, the top 100 co-ops in the US brought in over 222 billion ding-dongs in revenue. So they have a definite economic presence, for sure. But sadly, our modern business world, our modern capitalist system is dominated by a very different way of doing business. Yeah, the co-op idea, it's really utopian, right? We're all working together to make something great happen, but I'm sure we've all had that group project that went awry. For the most part, modern capitalism is all about making the most amount of money. And the best way to make the most amount of money is through private and publicly owned companies. when trying to figure out why co-ops just aren't desirable for many, we kept coming across the simple fact that people just kind of don't know what a co-op is or how to run one. We've seen complaints that we just don't teach about co-ops in business schools, for example, and that investors are often wary about them. On top of this, state regulations can make co-op structures very difficult to navigate. In short, if you want to start a co-op, you kind of have to have an in to know what you're doing. And there really isn't a lot of ins because there isn't a lot of co-ops in the first place, so the amount of resources are a lot smaller. It's a bit of a feedback loop, if you know what I'm saying. And the worst part about this is that even if a co-op is successful and it does get big, they often end up selling themselves out, which is what might be happening with REI. Now, I swear, we tried to end this video on a positive note. We really did. I wish we could just end this right now. Just roll the credits. Something we noticed while we were browsing on Reddit, etc., is that people are starting to have serious doubts about whether or not REI is truly a co-op. We found a few comments along the lines of, REI is a corporation disguised as a co-op, and a quick Google search will tell you that co-ops can technically be considered corporations, but I get the sentiment. People want to know that REI is actually different from everyone else out there, that they care about more than profits like they say they do. Our Changing Climate did a really good job of getting into how REI's corporate structure has changed since the Anderson family left the company, so we're not going to repeat too much of what he said. But basically, as the years have gone on, REI has become less and less democratic. Sure, members can vote for the board of directors, but only for candidates that the top dogs nominate. And apparently, less than 1% of members vote even then. But on top of this, there's also a very notable imbalance in just who profits from REI. Last year, the CEO made $4 million in pay and incentives, while dividends for normie members like myself consisted of cashback on purchases. And I'm sure that the CEO position is very stressful and very difficult, and I'm sure that this current CEO does a very good job. But $4 million on a salary for a co-op does make me feel like REI is maybe a little more profit-driven than they would like us to think. Instead of that profit going back into the community that they're a part of or into some sort of nonprofit that supports their cause, it seems to be going to a handful of people at the top of the pyramid. Now, hold on for a second. If you're imagining in your head, oh my God, there's gonna be a future one day where REI sells out completely and it's not even a co-op, what's gonna happen then? Let your imagination relax for a minute, because we actually have a very real life example of that exact thing happening right here in Canada. We Canadians up in the Great White North had something of an REI store named MEC, Mountain Equipment Co-op. The key word there being co-op, because MEC was essentially the exact same thing as REI. They bought products from other brands and companies from around the world, brought it into Canada, and sold it to their members exclusively. It was a great store. I bought a lot of stuff there. I had a great time until they were bought by an American company. The Walrus did an interesting piece in which they attributed the downfall of MEC to their slow progression away from their co-op foundation. The argument is that MEC diluted its core values in order to compete in a more mainstream market. They expanded very, very quickly. They opened a ton of stores, and the stores were very large. Over time, the structure got less and less democratic, and they lost the thing that made them so special, that they didn't have to play by those regular corporate rules. And a lot of people are worried that they're seeing the same thing happen to REI. But regardless of how you feel about REI in its current state, the reality is that REI proved to the consumer world that co-ops can be successful in a big way. There is an argument that co-ops seem to naturally rise up during times of economic crises. Basically, when things aren't working out, people are motivated to band together and find an alternative solution. And the thing is, we are heading into some tough economic times. I think we are all feeling a certain pressure with all of the challenges going on in today's society, so perhaps co-ops are on their way to making a comeback. Co-op structures where workers collectively own the businesses that they work for seem to be on the rise. In particular, a brewery in the town where I live recently sold all of its shares back to the staff who work there. There are also tons of waiting lists to get onto co-op housing, in which basically the group of people who live in a building cooperatively own it in their neighborhood. And I personally belong to a fantastic credit union, which is basically a co-op that is a bank. And I think all of this is fantastic. From the beginning, co-ops have challenged challenged the system. And no, they're not perfect, of course, but at least they give us an opportunity to question how businesses should be run. In many cases, as with REI's humble beginnings, they save members a ton of money too, and they do open doors that we wouldn't have had on our own. So maybe we've disillusioned you on REI, but hopefully we have sprouted a seed of hope for co-ops in general. If you did like this video and you want to see more of them, make sure that you're subscribed. And if you are, then we'll see you every week for another episode.